Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So the rows are still filling in, but please take a seat. We're just missing on Kiana. No, she's here. Perfect. Wonderful. Yeah. Welcome, welcome, and thank you very much for the introduction. We will touch now a bit of a different topic, and the name of our panel is Impact, Inclusive, International, and why deep tech startups now need to deliver more than just technology. So, I brought with me real cool guests today, and I just want to start with you, Kiana. Please introduce yourself briefly, what you're doing, and then we will move on with the other panelists, and then we will start into the questions.
Okay. So I was at Rocket and did my own startup experience. I did a lot of company building with Zalando and Holido, then switched side to the investors role, was at a big VC fund, and then decided to build my own deal-by-deal vehicle, which is called Lucy Capital. And I want to focus on real problems, solving the most crucial problems in the world, and also want to support diverse teams. So that's with me.
Thank you so much. Herman, please continue.
Thank you. My name is Herman Stockinger. I'm the CEO and founder of Easlink, an Austrian scale-up company in the deep tech and green tech space. We do automated EV charging, so it's about the function of the car to automatically connect to the charging infrastructure without handing a cable. And the company, currently we have 50 people, a very strong tech focus, a very strong IP portfolio, more than 80 patents filed, more than 45 of which are granted already. And by definition, just by the topic we are very internationally oriented and are active in all the key automotive EV markets, also in China, all the Asian markets, Europe and US, of course.
Okay, thank you so much. Please, Franz, also introduce yourself quickly.
Thank you, Tanja. Pleasure to be here. My name is Franz. I'm an Austrian, but I've been living in Germany now for more than 10 years. I'm working for invest.austria, for the AußenwirtschaftsCenter München. We are the official representation of the Austrian economy in southern Germany, and we're supporting Austrian companies on the German market, which turns out to be the most important export market for the Austrian economy. And in my role, I'm focusing on technology and innovation and try to follow what's going on in Germany.
Thank you. Luis, last but not least, quick introduction.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Luis. I'm today, or nowadays, managing partner at Kopa Ventures. We are an early stage climate tech VC with the focus on energy and mobility topics. Some years back, I built up 2 companies myself, one consulting business, mainly in the automotive space, and afterwards an AI company, became a business angel in between, and in 2018 I switched to the dark side, which is the VC side. And with Kopa Ventures, I initiated now, together with other families, our first VC, independent VC.
Thank you so much. So together with the panel, we would like to build on the hypothesis that it's not just investable because technology is impressive, but it needs more. It needs like impact on society, it needs diversity in the teams, and it needs international scalability. And therefore, my first question goes back to you, Luis. So when we talk about a diverse team, is that really a soft factor or a performance driver based on your experiences?
Of course, a performance driver. Of course, one can now differentiate because it all starts already with having a complementary team. I mean, it depends on the definition of diversity, but we are an early stage investor doing also deep tech, of course, hardware, software. And especially in the early stage, when it comes to deep tech, you normally are confronted or you get in touch with very technology-focused teams. And of course, then you need more business acumen also in the team, or need someone who brings it to the team. So starting already here with diversity, of course, mandatory and not a nice to have. When it now goes more in the let's say, deeper definition of diversity, like to gender diversity, cultural backgrounds, and so on and so forth. There are even studies that show that eventually, what is, of course, for us being a financial investor important, the financial returns on average are better with more diverse teams. That is therefore not a soft factor, but a hard criteria where we also, of course, being an early stage investor, support the teams in maybe becoming a diverse team if they're not at this level from the very beginning.
So Lucy Capital is a VC fund that's mainly focusing on investing in such diversity and such diverse teams. So I'm pretty sure you will support that, what just Luis said, right?
Exactly. So yeah, maybe to add, it's diversity drives performance. So it's not just a nice to have; it's a structural advantage. And as you said, it's most of the time diversity is reduced to gender, which is of course important, and it's a very easy dimension to measure among ethnicity or origin, but as you said, it's about, for example, also social economic backgrounds. It's about, you said, I think, culture. It's about disciplines. I mean, we as VCs always look on complementary teams. So, and this is not only cosmetics, it's about how teams approach risk. It's about how are they in problem solving and about innovation itself. And we know that homogeneous teams, they tend to optimize what they know. And heterogeneous teams, they discover what they don't know. And that's where innovation starts, right? Because as you said, deep tech startups, they operate in very high or long R&D cycles. They have very complex technologies. A lot of uncertainty, and there's no playbook. So that's important that you have different people with different perspectives. And we also know from science that diverse teams tend to create more data-driven solutions. So, and now look at me, I'm very diverse. I'm migrant, I'm a female, and I love to quote data. So when I have one of my favorites is that McKinsey looked into 1,000 companies worldwide, and they ranked them with a diversity score, and they found out that the top quartile, like those with the highest proportion of women in leadership, they financially outperformed about 25% the bottom quartile. So, and this is just one. I mean, there's a lot of science, so science backs this, and that's why it's more than just, you know, nice to have. It's a real advantage, and that's unfortunately often not seen.
Yeah. So let's check how practice is. Herman, would you consider yourself as a diverse team?
That's a good point. So Easlink is a deep tech company. The qualifications we have in our team, they range the entire spectrum. On the tech side, it's a lot of electronical engineering, software engineering, mechanical design, and typically in these disciplines, it's very hard to recruit real female talent because it's simply underrepresented. The dropout quote of the Graz University of Technology, that's the closest tech university we have, in these disciplines is around 10%. And we wrapped our head around it. So like, how can we actually get better and increase this ratio? By today, we have 25% in our leadership team female, which is, I think, for a tech company a good status. And we have around 10 different nationalities in our team, so we have the diversity aspect certainly also given. But Luis, I would also comment on the performance aspect. And I think for any company, the performance goal should actually be the prior goal. And diversity is actually a culture shaping element. And I really believe that culture in a company is a key success factor to actually deliver on performance. Mm-hmm. So whenever we diversify the team, we are super excited about getting female Indian software developers now into the team the upcoming month. Whenever we go into this diversity aspect, we always have to follow the prime goal of increasing the performance of us as a company. I think that's key. And then fully agree with all you said so far.
We will come back to being investable in a second, but a question to you, Franz. You're very close to the German technology market. So which kind of deep tech trends do you see upcoming? So let's look a little bit into the future.
Good question. I'll try to keep it simple because it's a very far-reaching question, and there would be a lot to tell you. And also, I think our audience is really educated. But maybe to boil it down into a couple of short spotlights, I could give you one field, one cluster I see at the moment is everything related with green transformation. So this is definitely a big field. We're talking about circular economy. You see a lot of interesting technologies that are very specific in bridging a certain gap in a value chain. Talking about electronics or chemical industry or textile. There are a lot of exciting examples. There's also the whole field of energy, I would say, which, I mean, it's trivial, but energy is really one of the key economic factors for an economy, and especially Germany is really challenged with energy prices. So everything that makes the whole energy value chain more efficient is highly sought after, and we see a lot of developments. But also moonshots in the energy space. Think about fusion energy, for example. Fusion is really on the radar in Germany. We have exciting startups that take scientific developments and try to industrialize it. They're very ambitious. They have, of course, they have a lot of challenges. This is true, but they also have ambitious roadmaps. You see a lot of public spending, a lot of public attention in the field of fusion technology with the new government. So this is this whole green transformation cluster. Then the second one, I think, is everything related to sovereignty, right? I mean, Europe, Germany, Austria, Europe, we have seen that digital infrastructure, we are not so sovereign anymore, but with a lot of other technologies, we have the chance now to stay sovereign. And especially now with the geopolitical developments of recent years, there's a lot of attention to defense tech. This is really a booming segment of the German deep tech ecosystem. You see, like technologically, the convergence of AI and autonomy with classical military hardware, they're converging at the moment and really growing fast with a lot of money flowing into VC and public, and also iteration cycles that have really accelerated due to the fact that there's a lot of connection to the goings on in the Ukraine. So this is a part of what I would consider sovereignty. Also, the whole space segment is also really strategically very important for Germany, and we see a lot of developments from the public side. 35 billion euro being put into this field by the German federal government, and also a lot of exciting space tech startups emerging, or not only emerging, but really actively developing and progressing. And so this is, I think, the second important pillar, and the third would be everything regarding future computing, which of course a very broad and diverse field, everything AI, quantum technologies, microconductors, semiconductors, microelectronics. So there's a lot of activity here, a lot of exciting spin-offs, and German government, but also like on federal levels, like Bavaria, where I'm from, they have a very good strategy of focusing their attention to a couple of really critical fields, like AI, like quantum, like space. And so these companies in these ecosystems, they're really thriving, and these, of course, bring a lot of chances for Austrian startups and for Austrian suppliers, but also, I think...
A lot of opportunities as well, actually.
Absolutely, exactly.
And where would you see the strongest potentials, actually, for Austrian or German startups when they want to go abroad, so when they want to do some internationalization strategies? What would be the sectors most promising?
Well, we are very closely connected, Austrian and German economies, so there's a lot of potential on every side. But I think I'm a big fan of doing what you're good at, looking at your strengths, and then trying to strengthen and develop them even further. And I think Austria has always been really good at making things, at manufacturing. We're really good at industrial automation, logistics, production technologies. So I think these are fields where we can really take what we have. There's a lot of potential in Austria. We have great engineering talent. We have great technical schools. We have great applied sciences that work very closely with the industry. And so we see a lot of developments coming from this ecosystem. And I think if we try to fuel that and try to focus on that, we can like create new industrial champions, I think, in the future. I could give you a couple of examples. Like, you might have heard of Nosy. I met him recently. They have won the Infineon Startup Challenge, and they have a great sensor technology that can be used in industrial automation, for example. So we have these companies, and we just have to have these technologies, and we just have to develop them. And I think this is what everybody here in the audience is absolutely keen on.
So stick to their own strength.
But even beyond that, I mean, if you look just when it comes to science and education, we are in Europe leading in many different topics and not industries, unfortunately, but topics. For instance, when I looked into what was quantum computing, like 4 years ago, I stumbled open the point that out of the universities, for instance, like Universität Heidelberg in Germany, you have one of the brightest guys coming out of these universities for quantum computing that led even back then to, in this case, it was, I think, an Australian quantum startup, growth startup, that opened up a beyond representative office in Germany just in order to get access to the brains here in Germany. So, and it's of course nothing new. We know that when it comes to research and education, we are still one of the 2 or 3 main regions globally, but bringing that into innovation and business, that is the big gap.
That's the main challenge,
overcome.
One thing to add, maybe we also lose a lot of talents, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we know people who went to the US, for example.
But now we have hopefully good chances to get them back, not just researchers, but also people who are bringing things into practice. But I would love to get back to you, Herman, because you said in the introduction that you're actually also a hardware-oriented startup, being that is not always easy, particularly when you want to scale, and particularly for internationalization. So maybe you can give us a little bit of insight. Why is it that hard, or what are the challenges, and how did you master it?
I think we are doing well in this regard. And probably, if you allow me, I would give you the context. So it's a technology which actually connects electric vehicle and the infrastructure. So it bridges 2 industries. And the particularly super interesting aspect about it is industry requires a de facto standardization. So it needs to be interoperable across different brands, and actually ideally there's one global standard for an automated interface between electric cars and the infrastructure. And we believe, or we are actually quite convinced, that we have the best technology here in Austria. We developed it in Austria. And we defined the vision of the company, which is to define this de facto standard from day one. So this was really the cornerstone of the company. And this actually derived the business model, which is tech licensing. So we license away this hardware technology to global partners. And this, from a hardware startup perspective, is a great advantage because we do not need to build up and invest into manufacturing lines and then ship components across the world. So we really can scale via forming the right partnerships. So actually the challenge for Easlink, even though it has a hardware core, was not to scale with scaling up manufacturing sites, but to scale with identifying the right partners and building the right relationships across the world. And we started to be active in China. Actually, the very first customer of the company was a Chinese OEM. So that was very, very kind of set in stone in our case as of the very beginning. And for us, I would say the biggest challenge was actually to gain trust from international partners and to dare to go abroad and actually get active in the markets which really matter. And Austria as a market is simply not relevant for us. So Austria is for us a pure working environment, I sometimes say. And we were kind of forced to go international.
So if you could elaborate a little bit more, particularly comparing maybe Asia, where you're quite active, the United States, Europe, what are actually the advantages of Europe compared also to the disadvantages that you are perceiving as being a scaling up star?
In our case, the key market for electric cars is very central. So we need to orient also on the Chinese market, which we did, started to do very early. and it has a huge market opportunity. And what we experienced the last years was actually that the geopolitical climate between China and the West changed, and that it's getting like more and more challenging to build up a trust relationship with Chinese companies. This is one of the experience we had. And does it still work?
Yeah,
To some extent.
To some extent, no. I think.
Yeah, it's working again.
No, I think I broke it. Sorry for that.
you can hold it probably.
Yeah.
And
And what's also important is the kind of the framework which is put in place by the different markets, and particularly in the US. The trend towards EVs, what we feel is that the current legislation in the US doesn't help. And so it actually, we deprioritize the US market to a certain extent because we're simply forced to be laser focused and be very careful with spending our resources. So we set up a clear priority. And I think the big advantage about Europe, so the disadvantage is clearly a very fragmented environment. So there are many different nations, and typically the Germans are doing their thing, the French are doing their thing, so it's difficult to approach the entire European market. But on the advantage side, Europe has a kind of a neutral position. So as Europeans, we are able to collaborate with Asian companies like in the same way, or also very well as we can do with US companies. So we can actually try to make the best out of this international and kind of neutral positioning we have.
Okay, thanks for your viewpoint. I would love to pass that question on to you, Kiana.
Can you please read in the beginning?
Yeah, just the question. No, the question would be, what are the biggest advantages of Europe when it comes to deep tech founders, but also investors? And what are maybe disadvantages as well?
For Europe, well, as Luis said, we have the best education here for these kind of technologies and startup founders. And for the time being, we don't have so much the US investors looking at Europe. They're a little bit distracted, a little bit probably also not kind of disappointed, but they don't really look deeper into, let's say, pre-seed and seed startups. So we would have a chance to be competitive in that way. And also the government is, we hope all, but they're getting more and more active to close this funding gaps, the big amounts who come then later with the later stages. So there are activities trying to push this because we built up the startups, and then most of the times the US VCs are financing the success curve. So, but I see a change in that, and so we kind of woke up to really keep talent here and close the funding gap.
Okay. Herman, you mentioned that you have around 80 patents, right?
True, yeah.
My question would go to Luis, because IP is a very strong asset when it comes to deep tech startups. Is that true? Or how would you perceive that also, considering the developments that Franz mentioned, like also software-based, AI-based developments in deep tech?
Of course, it depends on the solution, and if there are parts of it or the core is patentable, then it should be patented, or at least, I mean, if we're, for instance, talking to a pre-seed team, then maybe there's a pending patent application, but that is definitely mandatory if there's the chance to patent something. But in German we would say notwendige Bedingungen, aber nicht hinreichend. Mandatory but not satisfactory, satisfying for an investment, for instance, because of course, next to having IP, it's always about having, I would call it like bankable impact. In our case, being a climate tech VC, what do I mean with it? It should, and that is one of our main theses, that impact, ecological impact, goes hand in hand with a financial impact. And if it comes to an early stage team, of course, we're not talking about a major go-to-market strategy with hundreds of thousands of revenues, but at least a hypothesis how to get there. And that is, of course, then the other very important point for us when we talk to early stage teams about an investment. So yes, patent is mandatory if possible, but that is definitely not all. And what we also see a lot, and I come back to a point I mentioned before, in the deep tech space, with the very technology-focused teams we see, not most of the time, but kind of often. We and I also did several not so good investments so far in these kind of, I always call it like technology platforms, where you have some core technology and then plenty of potential use cases. And then it's about, hey, let's find out together with you, investor, what is the best use case for us. So therefore, also right from the beginning, we want to see a clear addressed use case and hypothesis where we also feel confident that they could hold to, that I would say.
Especially relevant if you talk about the DACH region, about our countries, we have a tendency to be very engineering-minded. We have the tendency to over-engineer sometimes a little bit. And the earlier you get the feedback from the market, and especially from international markets, international potential customers into your development process, then the higher the probability of success and of investment, right?
And deep tech does not always mean that it needs to be very, very complex. It can also be a kind of frugal solution, and it can be deep tech. But I think, Herman, you would like to add something, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on the IP side. I would consider IPs or patents for certain deep tech companies simply a hygiene factor. So we are, as you heard in the introduction, we are actually proud about the IP position we have, and it allows us just to operate in the field where we are operating. But in our case, it's also a crucial defense strategy. So in case we do not claim the patents, others can, and they could block us from entering the market. So for us, it was simply key and very important that we set up a clear global IP strategy. But I fully agree, it's of course not the market, and in case the technology doesn't find a clear path into the market, there's a problem, and it's not investable.
Yeah, and also, I mean, to have a real defensible IP might contain, if it's hardware related, mainly in Europe. I mean, in Europe it's hard to patent software IP. In the US it's way easier, but also when it comes to hardware and patents, that is only one key or cornerstone maybe of your IP defense strategy, but there's also business secrets, of course, and analytics and so on and so forth. So it's a number of topics you have to take into consideration and build a strategy on in order to have kind of a security, knowing that especially if you're a startup and get in a way of a big corporate, also patents might not prevent you from getting trouble. Just when it comes to deep pockets and patent lawyers and wars on patents.
Definitely true. It's not just about patents, but to have an overall IP strategy in place. I would like to stick to you, Luis, with the topic of greenwashing that moved somehow from just greenwashing into impact washing. Do you have any kind of experiences with that? Like, how do you usually measure impact related to your investments? And have you experienced somehow impact washing?
I mean, impact washing sounds like if someone does it on purpose. Yes, we definitely stumbled upon these kind of cases too, but what we see much more often is like this soft impact or for us to not quantifiable impact. Because
so
we are working with an impact methodology that always defines the core business model or parts of it also from an impact angle. Be it, I mean, very easily like energy savings / CO2 savings, for instance. So therefore, for us being on the safe side, we always quantify it and also track it afterwards, set goals and track it and together with the teams and on a case based on the specific business model. That's how we get along with the topic, and therefore we are not able to invest in impact washing kind of business cases by definition.
And you developed that impact model on your own, or is it like a kind of...
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, in our space, I don't know how familiar the audience is with our bubble of climate tech VCs, because especially the big ones like World Fund and Planet Ace, one of their core value proposition also to their own investors, but also to teams, is to have been developed their own impact methodology, which then normally goes hand in hand with a lot of scientific staff and a lot of costs. We, especially in the early stage, followed up a similar but different approach, in the sense that there are methodologies out there in the market, or we teamed up with other investment teams. There's also like networks, impact VC, and these kind of things that working where investors work together on impact methodologies, and we are part of these networks, and out of this we build our own impact methodology. It's actually theory of change in combination with the SDGs, we all know, because for the SDGs, there is already a set of quantifiable KPIs defined and related to every SDG. And this combination of change of theory and SDGs is our approach.
Okay. Kiana, could you add anything here from your own experience or practice?
Yes, probably one of my personal experiences. It's also not that VC teams like think about how can we raise a fund. Okay, we claim we are an impact fund. It's also the pressure of an LP. For example, one LP approached me and he wanted to give me a pretty big anchor investment and said, I want you to build an impact fund, and one of the main focuses is social impact. So I gave him kind of a calculation. I think we will end up, if we're really good, and mix it with health and climate tech, around 8 to 10% return. And he said, no, that's too low, it has to be higher, it has to be 20, it has to be competitive, because he would be the anchor, he wants to get some other people on board. And so I stepped back and said, like, probably you find someone, but that wouldn't be credible for me. I mean, if you want to include social impact, that's education or some other stuff supporting diversity, etc. There's not such a big gain at the moment to see. So that's just a personal experience that, of course, other fund managers then probably, try to convince him and write numbers down where they actually don't really know that it's not achievable. It's not really serious, to be honest.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing also that kind of insights. Franz, a more general question to you. So, like just following the media, we would see more a movement from green to clean, technology sovereignty, and defense you mentioned are getting more important. Like topics around like green tech might move more to the back. Do you perceive that as valid and future-oriented, or is it just an development in parallel, or how would you see that?
Yeah, I would probably consider it more a development in parallel. I mean, of course, obviously, defense is getting a lot of attention because for many, many years it wasn't talked about at all. And now for 3 years, almost 3 years now, it is able, or there are events like this, and they're talking openly about defense, and they're not calling it dual use, they're really calling it defense or even offense. So this is really a change in the public mindset. But I think if you're talking about green tech, climate tech, the whole green transformation part, this is ongoing, and I don't see it going down compared to defense tech or other issues. I think what makes Germany interesting is that there's such a big variety of different things going on. So many different clusters, so many different actors in different fields, and so a lot of developments are happening in parallel, and so this makes it still, I think, highly relevant for the Austrian economy.
Please, Luis.
Maybe I can add something, because not only in parallel, but there's also a big overlap. I mean, of course, it comes down to the definition of defense, but for instance, I talked to the World Fund guys. Now, they are a bit broader than us because we are mainly on sustainable energy and mobility things, but they also invest in food, for instance. And they showed that they have a 70%, so 70% 50% of overlap with the NATO Innovation Fund because of energy resilience, food security. That's all topics also covered by the NATO Innovation Fund, which is by definition also related to the defense sector, I guess. So therefore, it's not only going in parallel, but it's a big overlap.
It's an overlap, actually.
If I may add, if you look at the space, right? I mean, space is like a big platform, and once you have this access to space, you have so many opportunities to create all kinds of businesses that also have huge impact on green on SDGs, right? So it's connected.
But it is definitely in our bubble also now a very big topic for us. What does impact mean, and where is, talking about the overlap, but where's also the difference to the defense-related funds, and what is okay for us to invest in and what not? I mean, very maybe cheap example is, I mean, electrifying attacking airplane might not be a case where we invest, although it's electrifying the proportion, if it's possible. It's not for now, but just making a very easy but dumb example. So therefore, in our climate tech impact bubble, it is definitely a big, big topic. Where do we see overlap, and it is okay, and where do we have to differentiate us from the defense sector?
Yeah.
And it's not only in your bubble. I mean, it's not like everybody's shifting into in defense tech now, right? I mean, there are still many funds, many investors that say, no, we don't do that. This is not a field for us, and so you always have to consider that.
One example to add, I just remembered that one big VC company from Munich, and I think those times are over, but they also have an impact model, and they said Flixbus is an impact startup because people don't take the car, but they collect and go with the bus. So I think those times are over. It's not anymore sellable, but that was also impact.
Yeah, it's a broad definition, and of course we have to look what's really impact and what's not. And for my last question to you all, I just want to give you, Kiana, and also you, Luis, the possibility maybe to share one of your best investment stories, impact-related investment stories with us.
I start, then you can think a little bit about it. Yeah. So one company in my portfolio, and it's not obvious impact, it's a fraud detection company who detects bots, and you have to look a little bit deeper into it. So there are farms, let's say the URL is 12345, and they put advertisements on these farms. So you wouldn't find those pages immediately, but you will end up somehow there, and you would click then on advertising campaigns. And it's bot generated, so the company like Zalando or any other one has to pay for this click, but in the end the bot receives the revenue. And what are they doing with the revenue? They finance misinformation and hate speech. So it's actually, if you look at it, it's indirectly impact, but it is threatening our democracies. So these kind of startups normally wouldn't fit impact models. And that's why I did this investment.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing. Luis?
I would mention two of our portfolio companies. One that is already having a big impact, but business model-wise, the potential of the other is bigger if it becomes big. So the first one is 1,5, where we are invested. I don't know, maybe some of you know it. It's one of our unicorns here in Europe. And they're actually electrifying buildings. They started with single-family homes, but now also going for multifamily homes and commercial buildings. And they are already unicorn. They're in different countries active, also in Australia. So they have already a big impact. But business model-wise, it would be for me more Limatica, it's called. It's a Munich-based company. And they are in the battery cell business. Now, they do analytics for the battery cell manufacturing process, which could, by definition, become really, really good because they actually reduce the time for analyzing the produced battery cell. They reduce this time from 2 weeks now even down to maybe 10 minutes. And with the big volumes of battery cells that are already produced, but even more so will be produced in the future, the Matica and their reduction of production time is really having a real big impact financially to the producers, but also fostering the electrification of more or less everything.
Thank you very much for sharing as well. Maybe Herman, you can give also some advice from your founder perspective, maybe to other founders. So how deep tech startups could provide more impact or bring more for investors than just technology?
That's a big question. I would say I believe impact is actually something which needs to be defined at the very beginning of an entrepreneurial journey. So when it comes to Easlink, to be honest, at the moment we are progress driven. So we just want to be successful, and we are super active on the market. We generate impact. But the reason why we generate it is actually because we set the foundations of the company very carefully at the very beginning. So my advice probably would be to look for a real problem in the market which supports sustainability or like a positive impact for society, and which is not easy to solve. I think that's also an important aspect. Otherwise, there will be many. And in case you can find a solution which is actually needed, where there is a market, where there can be a strong differentiation, then I think the foundation is well laid. And then, of course, the entrepreneurial journey is an interesting one. It depends very much on the topic. So I think there's no rule of thumb or no general principle which can be applied. I think founders always need to have a very steep learning curve and be able to come across it, I would say. And that would be it. So I think focusing on setting the foundations of the company right at the very beginning is often not done carefully.
Last question to you, Franz. What could we learn as Austrian deep tech startups, Austrian investors from Germany, from the big sister?
Well, there are things we can learn from Germany. There are also things that Germany can learn from Austria, I would say. Mm-hmm. And this relation is constantly shifting and rebalancing itself. I think if I look, I might be biased, but if you look at Bavaria, for example, politically speaking, you can think whatever you want about Markus Söder and about the CSU, but the economic policy is really straightforward, and they're thinking in long lines. They're thinking not only for one election to the next election, but they have programs, and they're running programs that they last for 10 years and even longer. So this kind of dependability for scientific funding, for transfer is really strong. And I think this is one of the key elements why especially Bavaria is really performing strongly and has created such a strong ecosystem. And if it comes to deep tech startups, which I believe Munich is one of the hubs in Europe, definitely, then I think they have really started early in creating a strong environment, a strong ecosystems for deep tech. I mean, Unternehmertum, they're, I think, 23 years old now. And so start early and focus, and then on this long journey you can rebalance your system. But I think starting early has definitely been very much part of why Germany is so successful in deep tech.
Thank you very much also for sharing your opinion on that. So we discussed a lot about impact, about inclusion and diversity, as well as about internationalization. We learned about a very successful Austrian deep tech startup in the hardware sector. And if you want to see more of them, there is a room over there, just on the other side, where we also have some deep tech startups with real impact showing their solutions. So just take a look and some time. But now I thank you a lot for bringing in your input. It was a quite lively discussion, a very important topic, a very broad topic actually. And thank you so much, and big applause.
Thank you.